Okay, so I'm the chair of the Standards and Certification Standing Committee, and I'm going to talk very briefly about the progress of that committee this year and the plans we have for next year. And a lot of the detail of what I'll introduce here is going to be picked up by the other speakers, so I won't go into much detail, but I'll tell you when that's going to happen. Okay, I'll very quickly run through the membership of the committee. I'll talk about what its work programme is, and as I say, talk about its progress and its tasks that will be coming up. This is the membership of the Standing Committee. It's made up of the executive board members from the environmental NGOs and the social NGOs, but also one representative each from the major grower categories from Indonesia, from Malaysia, and from the rest of the world. And it also has Saludin, the technical director of the RSPO, as a standing member. Unlike other committees that do a lot of the work within the committee, we actually do a lot of the work in this way. I won't go through this slide, but it's really just there to frighten you and to remind me that actually all this work is being delivered by a lot more people than that committee. These are just some of the task force and working groups and the subgroups below them, some of which are permanent, some of which are temporary and focused on particular jobs, a lot of which of whom we're going to hear about in the rest of this session. So the main tasks allocated by the executive board to this committee are to develop the standards, the principles and criteria, to make sure that they are being interpreted and implemented and the guidance is available and indicators is available to make them work in practice in the field. And that's the core job. That's what we've been doing a lot of over the last years. I think there's two other tasks which we have to remind ourselves are important, and one is about trying to understand what the impacts, what the results of all this has been. We haven't done a lot of this in the past, and I think we need to do a lot more in the future. And then finally, there's one which I think is becoming increasingly obvious, and that's about trying to ensure that all the members of the RSPO are able to implement the standards and the requirements against them wherever they sit in the RSPO. So I think there's a big job ahead in terms of ensuring the capacity. It's not just about the information, it's about the ability to use that information. Progress this year is reflected in this graph, which shows the growth of production of both CPO and certified PKO. That's been very welcome. The figures which we've all seen, so I won't really go into, is the 5 million tonnes of CSPO, more than 1 million tonnes of PKO. The number of growers and the number of mills that are certified is growing, and actually also the number of countries where certified palm oil is being produced. And I think we shouldn't forget this. We're moving out of the heartland of Southeast Asia and spreading across the world, which is fantastic. But that introduces new challenges to ourselves. In terms of the interpretations, the national interpretations and the local interpretations that have undergone this year, we've seen national ones in Ghana and Thailand agreed. We've seen local interpretations by single companies in Brazil, in Colombia and Côte d'Ivoire. And we're also going to hear, which is why it's highlighted in orange, from Geert later on about the new system for a streamlined approach to national interpretations for small producer countries, and when we say small, we mean smaller than Indonesia and Malaysia, which is everybody else. On the guidance, there's going to be quite a lot we're going to hear in this session about the new planting procedure, which was reviewed as a result of discussions at last GA, and I think we've come out with a much clearer set of guidance to clarify what the expectations are from members. We'll hear about the development of a procedure and a framework around compensation for clearance of land without prior HCV assessment, which is a core issue not only for a lot of members, but actually also in public. It's one of the risks to the credibility of the RSPO that we've heard about. One of the reasons why uptake may not be as great as we would hope for is because of these sorts of uncertainties. We'll also hear from Marcus and Gary about the work that's been done over the year on HCVs, both in terms of the limitations to it, but also the opportunities available to do it better. And we won't hear now, but we will hear later from the Greenhouse Gas Working Group, which also sits within the remit of the Standards and Certification Committee. One thing we're not going to hear about, so I'll take a bit of time to talk about, is the reporting that is an annual requirement for all members of the ordinary members of the RSPO, whether they're growers or traders or users of palm oil. We have introduced a new annual reporting system this year. It now very instantly requires disclosure of the volume data of palm oil produced or traded or sold or used, and for growers, additional data on areas of land within concessions and under plantations. This is really getting to the core of this question, which have repeatedly come up, about transparency and people being able to understand what companies are doing and, more importantly, how they're progressing. One of the issues is about reporting, but also we need to think about progress on setting time-bound plans. These annual reports are available, if they've been submitted, on the RSPO website, and I would urge people to go to it and have a dig around, because there's some very illuminating data there. In terms of progress on submission of reports, I'm afraid it's still not very good. This is a chart from the website which talks about the percentage of each of the member categories who have reported. I'm very glad that I can now say the environmental and the social NGOs have 100% reporting, as do the financial institutions. But you can see from these red columns on consumer good manufacturers and retailers and growers that there's still a minority, but in some cases a substantial minority, who aren't reporting. And very disappointingly, on the processors, traders, it's the majority who aren't reporting, and that really isn't good enough. They are at the centre of this. They are the people who connect the growers with the markets. They have to be doing much more, and they have to be telling us what they're doing, and we have to hold them to account. So they really must report, and I can't stress that more importantly. In terms of the second part of the requirements in the Code of Conduct, the time-bound plans, we've also received time-bound plans between now and 2015, but as you can see, there aren't very many of them, and that is also very, very disappointing. I've been asked by the Executive Board to do a piece of work in this coming year which will look at what really ought to be appropriate time-bound plans for different categories, and I will be taking that work forward. And I would urge anyone who has ideas on this issue to get in contact with me, because again, I think us proving that we're doing the job we set ourselves to do is vital to the success and credibility of the RSPO. So, tasks ahead of us. The big one, which is going to keep me awake at nights all next year, is going to be the review of the principles and criteria. I will talk about that in a while. But we also need, I think, to do these other tasks which we haven't really yet addressed. So measuring the impacts of what we've been doing, further work on improving the reporting and making it very clear to all the growers, all the members rather, that we need to do that. And actually after we've done that, to make sure that the data is freely available and we are able to interrogate that and draw our own conclusions about progress. It would be great to think that WWF doesn't have to do another scorecard, but equally that there is scoring, ranking, progress measured on all the different categories. Okay, that's the end of me. I need to go back to the table to find out who's next. I'm sorry about that.